Marcus didn't think his walk home from basketball practice would change his life. But when he heard the crash and saw the smoke rising from a car, he knew he had to act. What he didn't know was that saving one man's life would reshape his entire future. Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Let's dive in. It was a typical autumn afternoon when Marcus Jones left basketball practice, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his mind focused on the weekend ahead. At 17, Marcus lived a life like most teens in his neighborhood: school, sports, and spending time with friends. The streets were familiar, the faces known, and for Marcus, life felt predictable, steady. But on this particular day, the steady rhythm of his world was about to be shattered. As Marcus approached the busy intersection of Cedar Avenue and Main Street, something caught his attention. At first, it was just a distant screech, the sound of tires skidding across asphalt. His instincts kicked in, causing him to stop in his tracks, his eyes darting toward the noise. He turned just in time to see a sedan lose control, swerving wildly before smashing into a lamppost with a sickening crunch. For a split second, everything froze. The people walking down the street gasped. Some screamed, and Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. Smoke began to curl up from under the hood of the car, an ominous sign that something far worse could happen if no one intervened. Without thinking, Marcus sprinted toward the crash site. Others stood frozen in shock, some pulling out their phones to record or call for help. But Marcus wasn't thinking about anything other than the man he saw slumped over the steering wheel. The closer he got, the more his heart raced. The car's front end was completely crushed, the windshield spider-webbed with cracks. Smoke was rising faster now, and a faint scent of gasoline lingered in the air. "Somebody call 911, Marcus shouted as he reached the driver's side door. His hands trembled as he tried to yank the door open, but it was jammed. With a burst of strength fueled by pure adrenaline, he managed to force it open. The man inside looked older, probably in his 50s, his face pale and streaked with blood from a gash on his forehead. He wasn't moving. Hey, can you hear me?" Marcus called, his voice shaking. There was no response. The seatbelt was holding the man in place, and Marcus realized he had to move quickly. The smoke was getting thicker, and he could feel the heat from the engine. He wasn't sure how much time he had before the car might catch fire, or worse. Forcing himself to stay calm, Marcus reached in and unclipped the seatbelt, then carefully but swiftly grabbed the man under his arms. The man's weight was heavier than he expected, and Marcus had to use all his strength to pull him out of the vehicle. He staggered backward, dragging the unconscious man a few feet away from the car before collapsing beside him, his chest heaving with the effort. Marcus glanced back at the car just as flames began to lick up from the engine. His heart skipped a beat. He had gotten the man out just in time. People who had been standing around rushed forward now, some shouting in panic, others dialing emergency services. Marcus, exhausted and overwhelmed, could only sit there, watching the flames grow as the sound of sirens began to fill the air. A paramedic team arrived quickly, taking over the situation. They worked efficiently, assessing the man's condition and getting him onto a stretcher. But as they lifted him into the ambulance, one of them turned to Marcus. "Did you pull him out of the car?" Marcus, still catching his breath, nodded. "Yeah," he replied, his voice barely audible. The paramedic gave him a long, searching look before nodding. "You probably saved his life, kid," he said before turning back to his team. The weight of those words hit Marcus like a tidal wave. He had saved someone's life. As the ambulance sped away, Marcus stood there, unsure of what to do next. His hands were shaking, and his clothes were smeared with dirt and sweat. He watched as the fire department extinguished the flames, the mangled car now just a smoking wreck. Slowly the crowd dispersed, and the chaos of the moment began to fade. But for Marcus, nothing would ever be the same again. He didn't want to wait around for reporters or questions, so he quietly slipped away from the scene, walking home with a head full of thoughts. His body still felt heavy with adrenaline, but his mind was racing. Who was the man he had saved? Would he be okay? Marcus had always thought of himself as just a regular kid, but today he had done something extraordinary. Yet, as he walked down the now quiet streets of his neighborhood, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. The praise from the paramedic rang in his ears, but so did the uncertainty of what came next. He had acted on instinct, without thinking, but what did it mean now? Would people see him differently? Did he even want that kind of attention? These questions swirled in his mind, but Marcus had no answers. All he knew was that his life had taken a sudden, unexpected turn. When he got home, his mother, Tina, noticed something was off immediately. "Marcus, what happened?" she asked, concern flooding her voice as she saw his disheveled appearance. I saved a man," Marcus mumbled, still trying to make sense of it all. He sat down at the kitchen table, recounting the story to his mom, who listened intently, her face a mixture of worry and pride. "You did a brave thing, Marcus," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But take some time to process it. What you did, it's going to have an impact on you, on your life." Marcus didn't realize just how true those words would be. That night, as he lay in bed, the events of the day played over and over in his mind. He had acted without hesitation, but the weight of what had happened was starting to sink in. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a story that would change his life forever. The days following the accident passed in a blur for Marcus. Life in the neighborhood had returned to its usual rhythm. Kids playing in the street, the familiar chatter of neighbors greeting one another, and the constant hum of life in the city. But for Marcus, things didn't feel the same. His mind kept drifting back to that moment at the intersection, to the sound of metal colliding and the heat of the smoke rising from the car. He hadn't gone looking for heroism, but now it felt like heroism had found him. At school, the whispers started. Marcus had been careful not to mention the incident to anyone except his family, but word travels fast in a community like his. A local news report aired a segment about the heroic teen who saved a man from a burning car. Though Marcus had left the scene before reporters could get a statement, people began putting the pieces together. He started noticing the way people looked at him in the hallways, some with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with envy. "Yo, Marcus, I heard what you did. That was crazy, man," one of his classmates said, clapping him on the back as they walked to class. "Yeah, dude, you saved that guy's life. You're like a real-life superhero," another added with a grin. Marcus smiled politely, but inside he felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He didn't feel like a hero. He had acted out of instinct, out of a desire to help, but the attention was unnerving. He wasn't used to being the center of anything, much less praise. What Marcus didn't expect, though, was how this story would ripple far beyond the hallways of his school. Later that week, as Marcus sat in his living room, his mother received a phone call. Her face changed as she listened, eyebrows raised in surprise. After a few minutes, she handed the phone to Marcus. "Marcus, it's for you. You'll want to take this," she said, her voice holding an unusual mix of excitement and seriousness. Marcus hesitated, then took the phone. "Hello?" he said cautiously. "Marcus Jones," came a deep, measured voice on the other end. "My name is Daniel Carter. I believe we have something important to talk about." It took Marcus a moment to connect the name. Carter, the man he had saved. His heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, unsure of what to expect. "I understand you were the one who pulled me from my car after the accident. I'm calling because I wanted to thank you, personally. You saved my life, son, and I don't take that lightly." Marcus could hear the sincerity in Mr. Carter's voice, but he still wasn't sure how to respond. I just did what I could. I'm glad you're okay, Mr. Carter." "I'm more than okay, thanks to you," Mr. Carter replied. There was a pause, as if he was choosing his next words carefully. "Listen, I'd like to meet you in person. There's something I want to talk to you about. I don't know if you know this, but I've been involved with the community for many years now, and I think we might have more in common than you realize." Marcus agreed to meet with him the following weekend, though he wasn't sure what to expect. After hanging up, his mom sat down beside him, a warm smile on her face. "Daniel Carter is a big deal, Marcus," she said. "He's been helping people in this neighborhood for as long as I can remember. Scholarships, job programs, youth centers, he's behind a lot of it." Marcus looked at her, surprised. "I didn't know that. He seemed important, but I didn't realize he was that involved." "Oh, he is. He's helped a lot of people get on their feet," she added. "This meeting could be a good thing for you." The following Saturday, Marcus found himself standing outside a modest, yet well-kept office building in the heart of the neighborhood. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by Mr. Carter himself, looking much healthier than the last time Marcus had seen him. "Marcus, good to see you," Mr. Carter said with a smile, extending his hand. His handshake was firm but warm. "Come on in. Have a seat." They sat in a cozy office lined with bookshelves and photos of Mr. Carter standing alongside various community leaders. As they talked, Marcus learned more about the man he had saved. Daniel Carter had grown up in a neighborhood not unlike Marcus's, facing his own set of challenges. But over the years, he had built a career out of helping others, working to improve education and job opportunities for young people in the area. "I didn't just want to thank you for what you did," Mr. Carter said after a while, leaning forward in his chair. "I wanted to offer you something, an opportunity." Marcus's interest piqued. "What kind of opportunity?" "I see a lot of potential in you, Marcus. You stepped up when others might have hesitated. That tells me you have something special. Leadership. I've spent my life trying to lift up young people like you, and I'd like to help you reach your full potential. I want to mentor you if you're open to it." Marcus was stunned. A man like Daniel Carter, a well-respected figure in the community, was offering to personally mentor him? It felt surreal. I don't know what to say," Marcus stammered. "Why me?" Mr. Carter smiled. "Why not you? You've already shown you're willing to step up when it matters. You just need guidance, someone to help you see what you're capable of. And I believe you can do great things, not just for yourself, but for this whole community." Marcus sat back, trying to absorb everything. The idea of mentorship was new to him, and the thought of being seen as a leader felt foreign. But at the same time, something stirred inside him, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the path he was meant to take. They talked for another hour, discussing Marcus's interests, his plans for the future, and the challenges he faced. Mr. Carter spoke of how important it was to give back, to use the opportunities he had been given to help others. By the end of the conversation, Marcus felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I'll be here to guide you every step of the way," Mr. Carter said as they stood to leave. "But the decisions you make, those will be your own. Remember that." As Marcus left the office, the weight of the encounter settled in. He had gone from an ordinary teenager to someone with a mentor who believed in him. But with that came pressure, expectations. He wasn't sure if he could live up to them. But as he walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The ripple effect of that fateful day was only beginning to spread. In the weeks following his first meeting with Mr. Carter, Marcus's life began to change in subtle yet profound ways. He started spending his weekends at Mr. Carter's community center, a modest building tucked away in a corner of the neighborhood. The center served as a hub for local youth, offering everything from academic tutoring to sports programs and career counseling. It was clear from the start that Mr. Carter wasn't just offering mentorship. He was inviting Marcus into a world dedicated to empowering others. At first, Marcus wasn't sure how he fit into this world. He would attend meetings, sit in on discussions, and listen as Mr. Carter and his team talked about community issues, but he remained mostly quiet, observing. He wasn't used to this kind of environment. Adults talking about serious topics, making decisions that could affect the entire neighborhood. Yet, something about it fascinated him. Slowly, Marcus began to feel a growing sense of responsibility, a quiet voice inside telling him that maybe this was where he was supposed to be. One Saturday afternoon, as Marcus was helping organize a basketball tournament for local kids, Mr. Carter pulled him aside. "I've been watching you, Marcus," Mr. Carter said, his voice calm but firm. "You've got the potential to lead, but I need to know if you're ready to step up. Leadership isn't about standing on the sidelines. It's about getting involved, taking risks, and sometimes making tough decisions." Marcus swallowed hard. The idea of leading anything felt intimidating. He'd always been more of a follower, someone who blended in with the crowd. But something about Mr. Carter's confidence in him made Marcus want to try. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Mr. Carter smiled. "I'm glad you asked. Next week I want you to start leading one of our youth groups. We've got a group of younger boys, middle schoolers, who need some guidance. They look up to you. I think you can make an impact." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. Leading a youth group? He barely knew how to lead himself, let alone a group of kids looking to him for direction. But he nodded, determined to prove himself. "All right, I'll give it a shot," Marcus said, though the uncertainty in his voice was hard to hide. The following week, Marcus found himself standing in front of a small group of middle school boys, their eyes wide with curiosity. They knew who he was, the kid who had saved Mr. Misset, Carter's life, and that alone seemed to give him a certain level of credibility. But Marcus knew it wasn't enough to simply show up. He needed to connect with them, to help them see that they, too, could make a difference. He started slow, asking the boys about their interests, their dreams, and their challenges. Some of them talked about wanting to play sports or get into a good high school. Others were more reserved, hesitant to open up. Marcus could see the uncertainty in their faces, much like the uncertainty he felt about himself. As the weeks went by, Marcus found himself growing more comfortable in the role. He wasn't a natural-born leader, but with each meeting, he learned a little more about what it meant to guide others. He shared his own experiences, talking about the pressures of school, the temptations to take the wrong path, and how difficult it could be to stay focused when the world seemed stacked against you. Slowly but surely, the boys began to open up more. They started asking Marcus for advice, looking to him as a role model. One of the boys, Jamal, caught Marcus's attention early on. Jamal was smart, brilliant even, but he was easily distracted. His teachers often complained that he wasn't living up to his potential, and he'd been getting into trouble at school for skipping class and hanging out with the wrong crowd. Marcus saw a lot of himself in Jamal, the same doubt, the same struggle to figure out where he fit in. But Marcus also saw something more: potential. The kind of potential that Mr. Carter had seen in him. After one of their sessions, Marcus pulled Jamal aside. "Hey man, I see a lot of myself in you," Marcus began. "You're smart, and you've got a lot going for you. But if you don't stay focused, you're going to miss out on the opportunities in front of you." Jamal looked at him, his expression guarded. "I don't know, Marcus. It's hard. No one really expects much from me. I'm just trying to get by." Marcus shook his head. "That's the problem. You're thinking small. I used to think like that too. Just get by, don't make waves. But after what happened with Mr. Carter, I realized that we can't just coast through life. We have to push ourselves, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Jamal looked down at his shoes, his face serious. "You think I can really do something? Like make something of myself?" "I know you can," Marcus replied, "but it's not going to happen if you keep messing around. You've got to commit. Stay in school, stop hanging with those guys who aren't going anywhere, and focus on what you want. If you need help, I'm here, but you've got to want it for yourself." Jamal was quiet for a moment, and then he nodded. "Okay, I'll try." It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a start. Marcus felt a sense of pride he hadn't expected. He was beginning to understand what Mr. Carter had meant about leadership being more than just showing up. It was about connecting with people, guiding them through their struggles, and helping them see the possibilities within themselves. As the months went by, Marcus's confidence grew. He became more involved in the community center, working closely with Mr. Carter on various projects. They organized job fairs, academic workshops, and sports events to keep kids off the streets. Marcus found himself thriving in this new role, even though it was far from where he had imagined his life going. However, with the newfound responsibility came challenges. Not everyone in the neighborhood was supportive of the changes Marcus was making. Some of his old friends began to distance themselves from him, not understanding why he was spending so much time at the community center. A few even teased him for trying to be Mr. Carter's little protégé, accusing him of selling out. It hurt more than Marcus wanted to admit. These were people he had grown up with, the ones he used to hang out with after school, playing ball and joking around. But now, things were different. Marcus was changing, and not everyone liked it. There were days when the pressure weighed heavily on him, and he questioned whether he was cut out for this kind of leadership. Was he really making a difference, or was he just fooling himself? Every time those doubts crept in, Marcus would think back to that fateful day by the intersection. He hadn't chosen to be a hero, but life had given him the chance to make something more of himself. And with Mr. Carter's guidance, he knew he couldn't turn back now. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Marcus sat down with Mr. Carter in his office. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Marcus admitted. "I feel like I'm losing some of the people who were closest to me." Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. "That's part of the journey, Marcus. When you grow, not everyone will come with you. But you're not losing them. You're giving them the chance to see who you really are. Some will understand, others won't. But the important thing is that you stay true to yourself and your purpose." Marcus sat quietly, absorbing his mentor's words. It was a tough lesson to learn, but one that he knew was essential. He wasn't just living for himself anymore. He was leading by example, showing others that change was possible, even if it wasn't always easy. As he walked home that night, Marcus realized that his life was on a different path now, a path of leadership, growth, and service. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. He was ready to embrace it, no matter where it led. As Marcus settled into his new role at the community center, he found himself becoming more comfortable with the responsibilities and expectations placed upon him. The nervousness that had once gripped him when speaking in front of groups was slowly being replaced by a quiet confidence. He was discovering that leadership wasn't about perfection, but about showing up, staying consistent, and genuinely caring for the people around him. The youth group he led was growing, not just in size, but in spirit. Jamal, the middle schooler he had taken under his wing, had begun to show real progress. He was attending school regularly, keeping up with his grades, and had stopped hanging around the crowd that had been pulling him down. Seeing Jamal's transformation gave Marcus a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. This was no longer just a volunteer role. It was becoming a mission. Every bit of progress made him believe that the work he was doing mattered. But while Marcus was finding his rhythm, challenges still surfaced. One afternoon, after finishing up a basketball game at the community center, Jamal approached Marcus with a troubled look on his face. "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" Jamal asked, his voice unusually quiet. "Of course, man. What's going on?" Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with a towel. Jamal hesitated for a moment, shifting from one foot to the other. "It's my brother. He's been getting into some trouble lately. He's hanging out with these guys who aren't good news, and I'm worried he's going down the wrong path. I don't know what to do." Marcus's heart sank. He had heard this story before, too many times. He knew how easy it was for young people, especially in his neighborhood, to fall in with the wrong crowd. He had seen it happen to friends, kids who had promise, but ended up making choices that led them down a darker road. "Does your brother come to the center?" Marcus asked, trying to get a sense of how involved Jamal's brother might already be in the programs they were running. "Nah, he doesn't really like it here. Says it's lame and that he doesn't need anyone telling him what to do," Jamal explained, frustration evident in his voice. Marcus nodded. He had heard that sentiment before too. "I get it. It's tough when you're trying to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. But you're his brother. That means you have a chance to be a bigger influence in his life than anyone else." Jamal looked at Marcus, hope flickering in his eyes. "You think I can get him to change?" Marcus smiled. "I think you can show him a different way. Whether or not he changes is up to him. But if he sees you making better choices, that might plant a seed. You're already on the right path, Jamal. You just have to keep leading by example." Jamal nodded, clearly taking Marcus's words to heart. As he walked away, Marcus felt a swell of pride, but also a familiar sense of worry. He knew how hard it was to pull someone away from a destructive path, especially when negative influences seemed to be everywhere. The following week, Marcus noticed something different. Jamal's older brother, Malik, started showing up to the community center, not to join any programs, but to hang around the basketball courts, watching from a distance. Marcus recognized the signs. Malik was curious but hesitant. He probably didn't want to admit that he needed or wanted help, but his presence was a small victory. Marcus knew he had to handle this carefully. One afternoon, Marcus approached Malik while he was sitting on the bleachers, scrolling through his phone. "Hey Malik, right?" Marcus said, keeping his tone casual. Malik looked up, surprised. "Yeah, what's up? I've seen you hanging around here lately. You ever think about jumping into one of the games?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the court where a group of teens were playing. Malik shrugged. "Maybe. I'm just checking things out. This place is more for little kids though, right?" Marcus laughed lightly. "Nah, man. We've got stuff for everyone here. It's not just about basketball either. We've got workshops, job training, mentorship, you name it. You'd be surprised what you might find here." Malik didn't respond immediately, but Marcus could see that he was listening. He sat down next to Malik, keeping the conversation light. "You know, your brother's been doing great. He's been showing up, putting in the work. I'm proud of him," Marcus said, hoping to plant a seed of pride in Malik for his younger brother's progress. Malik's expression softened for a moment. "Yeah, Jamal's a good kid, but he's always been that way. Me, I've got other stuff going on." Marcus nodded, not pushing too hard. "I get that, but if you ever need anything, whether it's advice, someone to talk to, or just a place to chill, you know where we are." Malik gave a non-committal grunt, but Marcus sensed that the door was opening, even if just a crack. Over the next few weeks, Malik continued to show up at the center. Slowly but surely, he started participating in some of the activities, first with basketball, and later with the job training program. Marcus saw the shift happening, just like he had with Jamal. It wasn't immediate, but it was progress. As Malik became more involved, Marcus realized just how much of an impact he was having on not just individuals, but entire families. He had never set out to be a role model, but it was happening whether he liked it or not. And with that realization came a deeper sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, Marcus's relationship with Mr. Carter continued to deepen. Mr. Carter would often pull him into meetings with local business owners and community leaders, exposing him to conversations about funding, program development, and long-term planning for the center. These were areas Marcus had never considered before, but Mr. Carter was determined to teach him the inner workings of what it meant to build something that lasted. One evening, after a long day of meetings and mentoring sessions, Mr. Carter and Marcus sat in the office, reviewing the progress of the programs. Marcus was tired but satisfied. The youth group had grown, more kids were coming to the center, and the community was beginning to take notice. "You've come a long way, Marcus," Mr. Carter said, leaning back in his chair. "You're not just leading these kids, you're leading this community. Do you realize that?" Marcus shook his head, still feeling like he was just scratching the surface of his potential. "I don't know if I'd go that far. I'm just trying to help where I can." Mr. Carter smiled. "That's what leadership is, helping where you can, lifting others as you go. You've done that, and because of it, this center is thriving. But there's more to be done." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "We've got momentum now, Marcus. The community is paying attention. We've got local businesses interested in sponsoring events. More schools are sending kids our way, and there's talk of expanding the center's programs. But I need someone to help me lead this next phase. Someone who's proven they can connect with people and make a difference." Marcus's eyes widened. "You want me to help you with that?" "I want you to lead it," Mr. Carter said, his tone serious. "I'm getting older, Marcus. I've done a lot for this community, but I'm not going to be around forever. We need new blood, fresh ideas, someone the younger generation can relate to. I believe that person is you." Marcus sat in stunned silence. The idea of leading such a significant project, of being responsible for the future of the center and the community, was overwhelming. But at the same time, something inside him stirred. A deep sense of purpose. "You've got the heart for this work," Mr. Carter continued. "And you've proven that you can make things happen. This is your chance to take what you've learned and build something even greater." Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. He had come so far from that day at the intersection when he had pulled Mr. Carter from the wreckage. And now, he was being asked to step up in a way he had never imagined. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility," Marcus admitted. Mr. Carter smiled. "None of us are ever truly ready, Marcus. But leadership isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about stepping up when the opportunity presents itself. As Marcus left the office that night, he couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Carter's words. The idea of leading the next phase of the community center's growth was daunting, but also exciting. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that he wasn't the same kid who had once doubted his ability to make a difference. He was ready to lift others, just as Mr. Carter had lifted him. And this time, he wasn't going to let fear hold him back. The next few years felt like a whirlwind for Marcus. After accepting Mr. Carter's offer to take on a leadership role at the community center, he dove headfirst into the challenge. The days of doubt and uncertainty were behind him. Marcus had grown not just into a leader, but into someone the entire neighborhood looked up to. His once small youth group had evolved into a fully fledged organization called Next Steps, with programs ranging from academic support to job training, mental health workshops, and mentorship opportunities. The community center, which had once been a quiet space on the corner of the block, had become a hub of activity where young people and families came to seek guidance, find support, and build a better future. Mr. Carter, though still actively involved, had begun stepping back more and more, allowing Marcus to take the reins. Marcus took the role seriously, always striving to do his best for the community, knowing that the work they were doing was more important than ever. The city's struggles with poverty, crime, and underfunded schools were still very real. But Next Steps had become a beacon of hope. Local businesses were beginning to take notice, offering internships and job placements for the youth who came through the center. Parents who once worried about their children falling into the wrong crowd now had somewhere to turn, a place where they knew their kids would be safe and encouraged to thrive. And yet, the journey was far from easy. Marcus faced setbacks along the way: funding shortfalls, conflicts between members of the community, and the constant challenge of trying to help kids who, like Malik, were hesitant to change. Malik, in particular, had become a constant source of both pride and frustration for Marcus. While he had made strides in the right direction, attending job training and showing up regularly at the center, there were still times when Marcus could see the pull of the streets tugging at him. Malik would disappear for days at a time, only to return looking tired and worn, as though caught between two worlds. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with potential sponsors, Marcus spotted Malik sitting on the front steps of the community center. It was late, and most of the kids had already gone home. Marcus could tell just by looking at him that something was wrong. "Malik, what's going on?" Marcus asked, sitting down beside him. Malik shrugged, staring down at his hands. "It's nothing, man. Just some stuff with my boys. You wouldn't get it." Marcus sighed. "Try me. You'd be surprised at what I understand." There was a long pause before Malik finally spoke again, his voice quiet. "I'm trying, Marcus. I really am. But sometimes it feels like no matter how much I try to do the right thing, something pulls me back. My boys, they don't get what I'm trying to do here. They think I've gone soft, that I'm wasting my time." Marcus nodded, understanding all too well. It's hard to break away from people who have been in your life for so long, especially when they don't see the value in what you're doing. But you've got to make a choice, Malik. You can't keep one foot in both worlds. If you're serious about changing your life, you've got to fully commit. Malik looked at him, frustration flickering in his eyes. "It's not that simple." "I know it's not," Marcus replied. "I'm not saying it's easy, but I also know what it's like to feel trapped, like you have to live up to other people's expectations instead of your own. You have to decide who you're doing this for. Is it for them, or is it for you?" Malik was silent for a moment, but Marcus could see the struggle on his face. It was the same struggle he had seen in so many kids who came through the center, the pull between loyalty to old friends and the desire for something better. Marcus placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "Look, you don't have to have it all figured out right now," Marcus said gently. "But just know that you have a place here. You've got people who believe in you, who want to see you succeed. That's more than a lot of folks have. Don't throw that away." Malik didn't say anything, but Marcus could sense the impact of his words. The conversation weighed heavily on Marcus's mind as he left the center that night. He knew Malek's path would be a difficult one, but he also knew that real change took time and patience. If there was one thing Marcus had learned from Mr. Carter, it was that the seeds you plant don't always sprout overnight, but with care and attention, they can grow into something powerful. As Marcus continued to pour his energy into next steps, his personal life was also blossoming. He had applied to several colleges, and with the help of Mr. Carter's glowing recommendation and the support of his teachers, he had been accepted into a prestigious university to study social work and community development. The news was both thrilling and terrifying. For years, Marcus had poured himself into the community, and the thought of leaving, even for school, felt daunting. But Mr. Carter had been adamant that this was the right move. "This is your chance to broaden your horizons, Marcus," Mr. Carter had said when Marcus hesitated about leaving. "You're already a leader here, but college will give you the tools to take that leadership to the next level. And when you come back, you'll be even more equipped to help this community." Marcus knew he was right. And so, with a mix of excitement and nervousness, he left for college that fall. The experience was everything he had hoped for and more. He excelled in his classes, building on the foundation of leadership and service that Mr. Carter had instilled in him. His professors took notice of his dedication, and soon Marcus was leading projects on campus aimed at helping underserved communities in the surrounding areas. During breaks, he returned home to continue his work at Next Steps, watching with pride as the organization grew in his absence. By the time graduation day arrived, Marcus was a changed man. Standing on stage in his cap and gown, he looked out at the audience, his family, his friends, and of course, Mr. Carter, who had been his constant source of support. As he took the podium to deliver his commencement speech, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. It had all started with a simple act of bravery, pulling a man from a burning car. But that moment had set off a chain of events that had reshaped his entire life. "As I stand here today, I'm reminded of the power of a single moment," Marcus began, his voice steady and confident. "Sometimes we don't realize how one decision, one act of kindness can ripple out and touch countless lives. For me, that moment came when I least expected it. But it taught me something important, that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter who we are or where we come from." The audience was silent, hanging on his every word. We live in a world where it's easy to feel powerless, to believe that our efforts won't matter. But I'm here to tell you that they do. I've seen it firsthand, in my community, in the young people I've had the privilege to mentor, and in my own life. Change is possible, but it starts with each of us making the choice to lift others up. That's what leadership is, lifting others as you climb. As he finished his speech, the crowd erupted into applause. Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. His journey was far from over, but he knew that he was ready for whatever came next. He had become more than just a hero for pulling Mr. Carter from that wreckage all those years ago. He had become a leader, a mentor, and an agent of change for his entire community. As the applause died down, Marcus looked out at the faces of those who had supported him along the way. Mr. Carter, beaming with pride, gave him a small nod, and Marcus knew. This was only the beginning. The future was bright, not just for him, but for everyone whose lives he had touched. Together, they would continue to build something greater, something lasting. And with that, Marcus stepped into the next chapter of his life, ready to carry forward the legacy of service and leadership that had been passed down to him. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.